Concerns over people's attitudes towards COVID-19. Doctors are reminding people of the need for boosters as a new survey reveals complacency amongst the public.
Let's stay on that for a moment. For more, we're joined by Evelyn Pang, General Manager of Moderna Biotech Singapore. Ms. Pang, nice to have you with us. Now, we've just heard earlier in the show that the majority of Singaporeans surveyed no longer view COVID-19 as a bigger threat as before. So I'm wondering, did Moderna anticipate and perhaps plan for this so-called vaccine complacency as more and more people accept it as endemic?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for having me. Yeah, vaccine complacency is a very long, drawn topic for not just COVID-19, but really for all vaccines since we introduced smallpox. Yeah. So I think what we see right now with vaccine complacency from the research findings was really because that we are moving from pandemic to endemic. Life has came back to almost normal for all of us. We're not wearing masks anymore. We could do all the things that we love. So that complacency could come in, and we saw that in the results, that 8 out of 10 of the elderly do not see it as a risk anymore to them. And that is the same for the at-risk population. And who do I mean for at-risk, right? They would be the patients with chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart diseases, lung diseases. They are the group that we really need to protect. And right now, they say that 1/3 of them say that they do not want to go for boosters anymore.
So in a way, one way you can address this complacency, because people get bored of anything, and that's the truth of it, is if your new vaccine is, I suppose, broader in terms of coverage. It can cover flu or subvariants of the coronavirus. Is that something your subsidiary here might be planning to do, so that by taking care of these other diseases, COVID-19 is included in that mix?
Yeah, very rightly put. We are the pioneers in mRNA research. We started in 2010. Before even people know about us through the pandemic. So what we have seen is that this is one of the research areas where one combination vaccine, if it's available, would be able to increase the uptake. So that is what we are researching on right now. So we have individual vaccines, COVID-19 being one of it at the forefront that the population has been taking for the pandemic. We have research in flu and then RSV, which is a respiratory syncytial vaccine. So once we have proven the efficacy and safety for this too as well, we would be able to use the technology to combine all of these three or all of the two together, depending on the public health needs of a nation.
That's very interesting. And you're right. It has to really be led by the Singaporeans and their needs as well. So I'm curious, how will these developments benefit Singaporeans? And is Moderna able to access or essential medical data from the pandemic that will ensure these developments are very tailored to Singapore's? Are you able to access such data?
Yeah, so we have been in very close collaboration with the government, with the healthcare community, since we have came in to support the country's vaccination program during pandemic. And I think with the subsidiary, it allows us to go deeper, to engage the stakeholders even more. So the conversations that I have been having since I came on board in December allow us to see what are the real unmet needs here, the public health needs. So yes, I think the access to information is there, but it's also about bringing the stakeholders together so that we could use some of the survey findings to address the at-risk population to get them to get their boosters. I think that's one. What is important also is that the subsidiary allow us to also bring in clinical trials for other research molecules that we're having. So Singapore is one of the trial sites and has started to be. So we introduce agent diversity because Singapore population is so unique. And we can contribute to the science, but also the research in this innovation.
I was just curious because you mentioned stakeholders, one of your stakeholders are your competitors. Are there any plans to bring that kind of knowledge together and to have some kind of transparency between the different parties?
Great point, and I think I get asked this question a lot. So there is no competition in science, right? There's no competition also in public health, in also protecting patients.
There is competition.
So what we are hoping to do is to really to say, can we create an ecosystem together, right? So there are research in place that we are at the forefront. There are also other partners, other players in the market, both globally but also locally. So it's about working with the government, the research ecosystem, to ensure that all of us are advancing mRNA technology to help patients, not just in infectious diseases, but also in therapeutics, like for instance, oncology, immunology, and also cardiovascular diseases. Some of this which is on the rise in Singapore.
You mentioned shortly before we went on air that Moderna had this advantage when it came to developing the vaccine for COVID-19 because it had started research on that kind of technology by as early as 2010. So it was a case of speeding it up really, really quickly. Of course, as we look ahead to Disease X, so that terrible disease that could take out most of humankind, I'm sure you're already carrying out that kind of research for this hypothetical, or actually it's not, it will happen, disease like that. How is that kind of work done when we're looking into the future and you do not know what will happen?
Yes, right. And the reason why we call it Disease X is because we don't know, right, what the virus would be. So the broadness of what the research has to take place would be there. That's one essential point. The second would be to say that, well, we have learned so much, right, from COVID-19. Singapore is one of the gold standard of how we have managed the pandemic. And that's the reason, one of the reasons why we say that we want to set our footprint in Singapore, to work with the government, to work with the researchers, to advance on the research in infectious diseases, so that we would be able to take the learnings, but also be ready for the future. Pandemic hopefully doesn't come, but we would be ready. I think the last point I want to add is that we do have a program called mRNA Access, which allows for researchers around the world, and I've introduced it to Singapore as well, to say that, well, they can use the platform, our proprietary platform, if they want to do their research in other latent, emerging infectious diseases. So we are making that platform accessible. So more researchers in the ecosystem can come together, and we are happy to partner all of them.
If we have time for another question, I'm curious. It was all hands on deck in the past few years with COVID, and now it's still all hands on deck for X, right? So I'm wondering, where has all this left other important work that we're doing to find solutions for other major health challenges? Has it set you back?
No, I think the team has, the company has expanded tremendously. But I come back to one point, right, that many people know us as a COVID-19 company, right, because that's what we were known for. But our research has been advancing tremendously in infectious diseases, flu, RSV that I talked about. Oncology is in the forefront as well, and we know that oncology is one of the key issue, right, that we're having in
major
Singapore.
Killers worldwide.
Yes, correct. And on top of that, I think what is important to note that, in Singapore, cardiovascular disease is on the rise, immunology as well. So what we have done is also to research in these areas so that hopefully, right, we will be able to, through our investigation, research, find some solutions with the mRNA technology to support the unmet needs in Singapore.
All right. Really do appreciate you coming in and speaking with us on these difficult topics. Thank you so much. We've been speaking there with Evelyn Pang, General Manager of Moderna Biotech Singapore.